Minister Trudeau said we penetrate the cabinets.
I also want to reiterate how deeply sorry Canada is for the situation this put President Zelensky and the Ukrainian delegation in. It is extremely troubling to think that this egregious error is being politicized by Russia and its supporters to provide false propaganda about what Ukraine is fighting for.
Why does this government treat Alberta like a fart in the room that nobody wants to talk about or acknowledge?
I heard her say a word that I know is distinctly unparliamentary, and I think she may want to withdraw it. The word was F-A-R-T.
We love your Mr. Trudeau. I mean, his family's always been such big fans about that.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode, I'm going to remember this, episode 9 of the Maple Files. I'm your host.
I can't remember any of the episodes of my show, so go ahead.
I have to look at the screen. I'm that bad.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I am your host, Snow Himbo. Yeti has got the same rash that Big Mad Crab is suffering from, unfortunately. He's on the road, so he's moving. So we can't really ask him to like stream from his car. But I have guests. I have friends. Everybody knows Angel from the INN Network. And we have Tyler Pop as well. I'm going to do a quick introduction. Tyler Pop of the Fix Collective, known as @TylerPop with 2 P's on X, is an unapologetic independent journalist who cuts through mainstream noise with hard-hitting, no-nonsense political commentary. Known for his sharp insights and fearless takes on controversial topics, Tyler isn't afraid to challenge the status quo and speak truth to power, which I like because that's what we like to do here. Anyway, how's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Well, thank you. Ready to go.
Cool stuff. How's everybody's week been?
Had kids visiting all over the weekend, so it was good to have them around. But
nice.
The weekend was an interesting weekend. I'm looking forward to. I'm really impressed with the way the weather has held up recently. It's been super nice here in Toronto. Looks like the next couple days is going to be a little bit rough, but geopolitically, we're in a shitstorm right now. So I can't wait to get into the nuts and bolts of that.
Yeah, it's goddamn. I don't know if anybody follows Scott Ritter. But he keeps his finger on the pulse, and he's been like 5-alarm fire for the last 3 weeks now. Just saying, like, guys, focus, stop being distracted. We are sleepwalking into nuclear Armageddon. So,
yeah, I don't think in my lifetime, I'm in my 50s. So for me, I've been around for a while, and I don't think there has been a time where we are closer to nuclear Armageddon than we are right now.
Yeah, it's a good thing I've been collecting bottle caps.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have done those drills in school where you had to hide under the desk before a nuclear bomb drops. I'm old enough to have done that, so it's like,
oh, me too.
So we're close. I agree. We've never been closer to nuclear war. It's like Israel's invaded Lebanon straight up now, and it's like, oh, now we're going to get dragged into a holy war for no reason in the U.S. I don't know about the Canadian government, whether they're going to send military there or not, but the U.S. definitely will.
So what'll probably happen is that Canada will be, if anything, drawn in to help on the Ukrainian side. They might be able to assist with, guarding shipping lanes or something like that with our limited fleet that we have, but we don't really have enough air power or sea power to be of any significant help or hindrance.
The U.S. will help. No, you don't need to worry about that.
Well, interesting you mentioned that. When you consider what has been happening, I don't know if you remember the Dwight D. Eisenhower being run out of the Red Sea by Yemen. And then they just a few weeks ago they had what was it? Was it 7 strike groups? Was that how many there were? sitting in the
think
region. They had 3 in the Mediterranean. They had 1 in the Red Sea. There was another one off the in the Gulf of Oman. So when you look at that and look at what was available there, it's pretty scary to think that all it would take is one missile to hit one of those ships, and that's it. It's game over. There is no stopping what happens after that.
Yep.
Yeah. And the especially scary part is like, it's not like all these isolated conflicts are just completely alone. I mean, if we get into a war with Iran, we're not just getting into a war with Iran. If we get into a war with Russia, we're absolutely not getting into a war with Russia. Like, they have alliances now. They have a massive alliance that is basically making our alliance look pathetic to be.
Well, to quote, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Angel.
No, here, if you invade Russia, here comes China, here comes North Korea, here comes India, and we're in a big world war, So it's like, oh, great, genius, you just attacked Russia. Now the Ukrainians are attacking in Russia directly, and I'm like, why are you doing that? You're just going to get yourself killed. That gives Putin justification to invade even further into Ukraine. He could have already taken Ukraine if he wanted to, which clearly he doesn't, or else he would have taken it by now. He just wants Ukraine to agree to a deal with to never join NATO. That's it. They won't even do that. And it's like, no. Keep giving him weapons, keep giving him money, proxy war, Ukraine. Yeah, let's just kill all of them. So let's just sacrifice the Ukrainians so we don't have to start a world war with the Russians.
Yeah, the scary thought is that the situation in Ukraine with them invading the Kursk region, and then they're talking about giving them long range missiles.
That's genius.
Well, if we look at the rhetoric that the U.S. has used, and I'm pretty sure that Scott Ritter has covered this, but I'll bring it out again, is that you allow that, and then you condemn Iran or you condemn any other actors that supply arms to other countries that are in opposition to NATO or to the U.S. or to Israel, and they don't see how hypocritical it is and how hypocritical it appears to the rest of the world. And things have drastically changed since the Ukraine Russia conflict began. The world doesn't view the U.S. the same way that it used to. It doesn't view Canada the same way that it used to. And when you consider how much the global South is in opposition, I mean, look at what's happened in Africa just in the last 9 months, the last year and a half. It has changed drastically. We've had several countries boot the French out. We've had the U.S. booted out as well out of a couple of countries. You're looking at a drastic change in how the world views the actions of the U.S. and who they support. Israel, they're virtually a pariah state. We had a vote last week where I believe it was 143 countries voted in favor of sanctions against Israel.
Correct. It was something like that. It was an insane, 143 countries. It was a lot.
Maybe it was 127 and 43 countries abstained, but that's beside the point. Nobody 2 years ago would have considered that even of being a possibility, that that many countries would look at things the way they are right now. So when you look at what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, and as I was heading into there, I went off on a tangent, but when you look at that and sending in long-range missiles to Ukraine to use on, the sovereign territory of Russia, it's one thing to send a few drones, but when we start talking about nuclear-capable cruise missiles, when you start looking at the F-16s, which are also nuclear-capable, you have to consider the fact that Russia is justified under Article 51 of being able to attack the source countries of those arms. So, or just the staging areas. So you're talking about Romania, you're talking about Poland, you're talking about Baltic. If they came from, say, France, right? They could attack a French airbase. They could attack the Ramstein airbase in Germany. All of
Yeah.
these things are on the table now, and that's an extremely scary thing.
Yep.
Yeah. It's borderline terrifying. I mean, the general vibe I'm saying is that most countries were kind of given a choice to pick a side, and they pick the other side. Uh, that's the whole BRICS thing we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, there's a big dog. Okay, we're gonna go with because fuck you assholes. You've done nothing but
Mm-hmm.
sanction us and kill everybody all over the world for years upon years.
Mm-hmm.
And the West can't handle that. They really can't. I read recently in the news, what are they spending? They're spending like $1.6 billion for like anti-China propaganda. It's so goofy.
Scoof.
And I'm just like, it's not going to work. Like, we are living in the midst of a dying empire. It is
Yeah.
a empire in decline.
Absolutely. And when you talk about that money, we at the same time that you mentioned that, you've got this step up in the rhetoric from our news agencies that are basically parroting I call them the prostitutes and the governmental stenographers that repeat the information that our intelligence community throws out there that is patently false, that Russia is interfering or China wants to interfere and it's all propaganda. I mean, barring the fact that anybody knows, if you studied what we study, that you know that there's good propaganda, there's bad propaganda, there's yellow propaganda, black, red. There's different forms of propaganda, and the fact of the matter is that when you start vilifying other countries like this, it has consequences. So
Mm-hmm.
when you start vilifying somebody like China, it's one thing to do Russia, but when you start vilifying a country like China, you've got problems in the future with that country because
Mm-hmm.
they do not appreciate it, and they're the country that is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world now.
Yep.
When you start talking about applying
Mm-hmm.
sanctions to them,
Mm-hmm.
applying tariffs to their goods in a protective fashion, you have to understand that they're going to do the same thing. They're going to look to countries like Russia and say, okay, well, if Russia is able to produce this amount of wheat, and they want to put that much on the market, we could probably get it for less than we can get it from Canada, say.
Mm-hmm.
And Canada is going to back the U.S. in their vilification of China, and they're also going to back the U.S. in their tariffs against our electric vehicles, our EVs, and put a 100% tariff rate on them. Then we should put tariffs on their goods that compete with our products. And we have a 1.1 billion population that can consume most of these goods, and it's problematic. And then we've got other countries in the regions that are going to listen to us as well. What if China was to convince North Korea to stop participating in producing electronics for Samsung or for the auto industry there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
they could essentially send us back to the Stone Age with relative ease, especially considering, Canada is doing a little better than the States, but the States has largely become a service economy. They like we. It's the biggest example of shitting where you eat that I've ever seen. It's like you're creating enemies with all the countries that you depend on for your country's like internal stability on multiple levels.
Mhm.
So
This is what a failing empire looks like.
well, if you
The
think
United
about it,
States. Yeah.
it has all the traits. We've got
Mhm.
military overextension. Like that's always been the case with the West, but right now it's like it's nuts. It's like what are you doing? Um, you have a ramp up in authoritarian traits, which has been across the board in the West. Some of the stuff in the UK, for example, is scary. Some of the stuff our
Okay.
country has done in the past, whether or not you agree with the cause, for example, freezing people's bank accounts for protesting is terrifying. That
Oh,
is
yeah.
that's something that should never happen with any country. And it's we're And also, which is the main topic of tonight's show, but you have the ramping up of propaganda. I like that, prostitutes. I might steal that from you. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's. I titled this episode "Disinfo Nation" because I want to focus on the Canadian media, because I know a lot of people, we like to focus on, CNN, Fox News, like all the propaganda outlets. But up here in Canada, we got some doozies too. I did cover on a previous episode there was a recent scandal with our Conservative Party using like bots to spread like pro-conservative propaganda, and I'm not surprised that we're seeing this in the West in general, like a conservative surge. I don't feel like it's super organic. I think a lot of it is just liberals bad, and I get that we kind of go through these cycles. But we're seeing like this huge conservative surge of just like, even on Twitter, I see my timeline is just inundated with like reactionary bullshit. And I'm like, okay, I know I shouldn't. What about the For You tab is for me right here? I am a Marxist. Why am I seeing reactionary garbage in the whole feed? What is going on, guys? That's not for me. Is it for me to get mad at and then take the bait and yell it? Shit, I do that. Gonna work on that.
Yeah, I don't even do that anymore. I'm to the point now where I know I'm politically homeless in my country. There is nothing that my political landscape can offer me. The only thing I can do is criticize, and then, I won't spoil my vote, but I'll definitely vote like Green, or I'll vote People's Party just to skew the numbers in my riding. I've got a riding where so a riding is like that would be like a voting district in the U.S. Okay. So mine is in this sort of the north central of Toronto, and I've got a choice between. It doesn't matter whether it's provincial or a federal election, so a state level or a federal election if you're from the U.S. It just doesn't matter because they're all Zionists. One, they're all like my provincial member of parliament is the Solicitor General of Ontario, and so he's a huge Zionist. He was on my doorstep the other day. As a matter of fact, I had a good conversation with him that lasted about 2 minutes before he hightailed it out of here because he realized that he was speaking to the wrong guy. And that was because I asked him, who would I, so you're the Solicitor General. Is it you I talk to, or is it the Attorney General if I want to refer a politician to be charged under the Genocide Act in Canada? Well, he says, well, that's federal. And I said, well, no. I said, because it doesn't state in our law. It says just that it has to be approved by an Attorney General. It doesn't state whether it's provincial or whether it's federal. It just says an Attorney General. So he confirmed my address and then he left.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, the closest I had I think it was the Liberals, but they called me for like a survey just to get my take on like what are you. I just want to know, and they give you all the questions of like, how satisfied are you with your current government? And like it got awkward really fast because I went into like a rant, and I could tell this poor lady, like, she was just sitting there like with her pen or at the keyboard or whatever, and she was just like, I just need like a little.
I have questions, and can you give me specific answers, yes or no, to these questions?
Just
pretty
yes.
much. And I'm ranting about like corporate capture and billionaires and international violations of law, and she's just sitting there like, she's probably looking at the clock like, just 10 more minutes. This is the 10th asshole I've dealt with this hour who's just ranting about how bad our government is. But yeah, that's pretty dope.
I'm just checking out while you're speaking here. I'm checking out the comments and they're pretty funny. It seems like some people are having trouble finding Canada on the map.
I once met a person in Florida on vacation who was convinced that Canada didn't exist, and he told me I was lying when I said it was from Canada. He was convinced it didn't exist. He could have been trolling me. That's entirely possible. But I know I've met actual people who don't think Australia exists. They're like, no.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, let's dive right in. The first thing I got on the docket is just a little I'm noticing an influx in the CPC, I don't know, the bot coordination. They've got a whole Canadian team. It's just like the States. Angel, you know how they've got what are the big ones? Like Cat Turd,
yeah.
Ian Miles Long.
Yeah, him.
Krasensteins. Yeah, you've got whole reactionary industrial complex. Well, this is one of the big ones. I'm sure you're familiar with this lady. So I'm seeing a lot of these. This guy, I am convinced this pleb reporter dude takes government money. I'm convinced.
Pleb reporter.
But I've noticed within a very similar time frame here, we're seeing a lot of weird pro-Trump content. And I get pro-Milhouse, I call him Milhouse, Pierre Poilievre content. I get pro-Pierre content, but it's interesting how they're kind of they're almost aligned with the whole Trump thing that's going on.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've been saying for about a year and a half now that Pierre Poilievre is trying to capitalize on the populist movement that took place in the U.S. And I think it's something that's been coordinated with different conservative groups that are international in nature. I don't know if you know this, but they coordinate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a group that's actually, it's kind of run by evangelical Christians and Zionists. And it's a very conservative group. And Stephen Harper is very, very high up in that organization. The name of it escapes me right now. But yeah. So, I mean, it's not that I want to vilify the conservative side. I just think that a lot of conservatives are being duped into taking on policies that they hear that the higher ups want, and they feel that it's something that's really important as Canadians to support. But in reality, I don't think they understand what the ramifications are of these policies that they want to implement. So yeah, Pierre Poilievre has been engaged in. If you look at the amount of money spent on travel by Pierre Poilievre in his last fiscal year, he had actually more than doubled the amount that Trudeau had spent on travel and on other things. Much as they like to claim that they are fiscally responsible, it's kind of hard to justify why the leader of the opposition would be spending more than twice what the Prime Minister of Canada is spending, unless he's trying to use government funds to promote his election campaign, because we're in a minority government that could fall at any point in time. And I believe that that's what has been happening.
Yeah,
at least conservatives haven't been tricked by Donald Trump up there.
They have been. That's the thing.
We have been. That's kind of what we're showing here.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm learning here. So, okay. As good as I'm conservatives here is they're all in on Trump. It's evangelicals, everybody. I'm he's just as bad, if not worse, than Kamala Harris, and you're acting like he's some kind of savior to the country. And if we just elect Trump, everything will be fine. I'm didn't you see the first term? I guess not. I must have forgot about it.
My favorite thing about Donald Trump was listen to his rhetoric when he talks about tariffs. If you know what a tariff is, it becomes painfully apparent very, very quickly that he doesn't actually know what a tariff is.
Yeah.
He's referring to it in a way that makes no sense if you know how a tariff works.
He almost treats it like it's a sanction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
He thinks
that's
they're interchangeable.
And
And
they're
it's like, dude,
not the same at all.
this isn't a magic thing that just makes a country give you money. That's not how that works. But that's how he's talking about it in his head. And it's like, you can just tell he like heard it one time. And then he's like, oh, this is the conclusion I'm going to draw. And I'm too narcissistic to actually ask anybody for like advice on anything. So I'm just going to go with this. And I think deep down, he knows that the majority of the supporters, it's not even that they're dumb. It's that even if they know better, they are going to just accept it and regurgitate because he's their guy. And if we get our guy in office, then all the problems will go away.
I think it's actually because people are desperate, and because like us, they feel politically homeless. They've looked at the George Bush era, and they saw how they were sold down the river for a globalist agenda under him. And then you had Barack Obama, who did the exact same thing. Essentially, other than talking points, when it comes to the left and the right in the U.S. and in Canada and in Europe, there are very little differences between them in terms of policy. It's all in the way they address the public and how the things that they speak about as soft or sore points for the voters. They create a lot of social unrest, social polarization, but they don't really talk about the policies that are the ones that affect people the most, that come down to dollars and cents, how their tax dollars are being spent, how they support military interventions, what that means in terms of sanctions and tariffs, how that affects the end consumer inside of their country. These are the problems that we have with our governments, is that they get sucked into these things, and because people are so desperate for change, they'll latch on to anything because they have to do something. That's what they feel like. We have to do something. We have to stand up. We have to have a voice. And like any other, if you've studied color revolutions at all, this is something that the governments, especially in the intelligence communities and the security community, know that once you get people upset enough to go out and actually campaign for a leader of a political movement or to stand up to a government, then they become a loaded gun. At that point, you just have to find a way to point it in the direction you want, and then that loaded gun can go off. So that's the danger of populist movements, is that you can get them redirected in ways that people don't really think about while they're part of that movement. And I think the biggest example of that we could see, there's two of them. The most recent one, I would say, would be the Maidan coup in Ukraine, and then before that was the Arab Spring. Unforeseen, outcomes to what people wanted. They wanted change. They were willing to go into the streets and take down the government to do it. But what happens? What is replaced when that occurs? And in both cases, I would say that they were largely mistakes, and that the people regret doing what they did.
Yeah. That's I've covered this on Politically Homeless before. The big problem is that any movement that threatens power runs the risk of infiltration. It runs the risk of complete co-opting entirely, and it runs the risk of misdirection. And the people, the psychopaths that rule this world, they're not stupid. They're not. They're not. We're not just going to slip a fast one under it, which is why I'm always hyper vigilant when these movements occur, because it's like you can't just get the movement off the ground. You also have to monitor the movement. You also have to be very vigilant of any kind of attempts to redirect revolutionary energy in a direction that you don't want it to go. Yeah, to my point, it's stuff like this. Republican Canadian girl. First off, like this is a very confused. I don't know what's going on here. Republican Canadian girl, so they're Canadian, but they're MAGA, God, freedom, MAGA, Alberta. I'm shocked. I am so shocked. I didn't expect Alberta. I was expecting, Kelowna. No, but it's stuff like this. That's just really weird because we have this concerted, and if you look at the time frame, it's like this crap is really close to the exact same time as the previous ones that it comes out. So it almost feels like there's like a pulse that goes out, like a push, a propaganda push of some kind. But I've been seeing this all across social media. Just this coordinated like pro-Trump sort of stuff and larger, this concerted, and it's all the same talking points. It's a lot. It's very similar to the States actually, because now we have all these accounts that are. Let me guess. I swear I haven't done this before. I'm just going to do a little test. Oh, okay. Because they're all in lockstep calling Justin Trudeau a communist. Okay, that's an L on my part.
Not necessarily an L on your part. Back out, go back to X, and then try to search again.
What, just like in general?
Yeah, just like click the X, the X button. It'll take you to home, right? And then try a search now. Because sometimes you get a little bit of a glitch when you're searching, and I found that sometimes it'll say no results, and then you back out and it'll give you results. So.
Oh.
No. Interesting.
But hey, we can just do this. Hey. This is.
Ooh, where's all this background noise coming from?
It's me. There's motorcycles, people revving their motorcycles and shit. I'm sorry. It'll go away.
It's all good. Yeah,
it's coming from my side.
This is what I'm talking about. Oh, this is a good one. Drew Harley. I hate Trudeau. Of course, we have this is mandatory flag, I guess now. I didn't realize we were that. And again, he's got Trump 2024. Bro, you're Canadian. What are you doing?
He's Canadian. I didn't know any of this. Like, why are Canadian conservatives all in on Trump?
It's weird. It's really weird.
So I don't know if you guys remember. Well, I don't think Angel will remember, but back in the mid 2000s when there was an election here, a federal election here in Canada, and afterwards it came out that the Conservative Party was using robocalls, and they were giving out false information to potential voters, and it actually became a legal issue for them, and they were found to be committing offenses against the Election Act.
Ooh. And well, that happens here in the U.S.
Sure, but
they give fake voter. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to finish. Just the fact that now it's gone from doing these robocalls, and I get calls from the U.S. as well. I get calls from the Bernie Sanders campaign all the time that I just ignore.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Like the political apparatus has moved so far beyond what the laws actually are, and now we're into the online sphere where it's so hard to police any of that. We can't prove any of it unless we have like a government organization to track it, because you need a lot of people to track something like that down to get a full picture of the scope of it. But us as citizens, we can see it online. If we're regular users, we can look at it and say, okay, well, why am I seeing the exact same phrases being used, the exact same tweets or the exact same posts in different social media from multiple accounts? and they're all within a certain period of time from each other. So it's a bot army that's doing it. And that's the thing, is they try to make it appear to be organic. And when people, this is just a fact. We know this, that when people see information numerous times over a prolonged period of time, they tend to accept it as fact rather than their ability to filter it out and say, I don't believe in that, or I don't think that that's true. They start to question their own reality and say, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong on this. And they get sucked into these political gangbangs. I look at them that way. That's what's going on, is that it's an orgy of hate, usually, against the other side, and that's where you get this massive disconnect between different political groups, and it takes away our ability to think critically about what exactly is happening. Why would they do this? Why would they go down this road? It's just, to me, I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit more resistant than other people, but to me, it's
I'm scrolling. This is all just from the last 4 hours.
Jesus.
Yeah. Hold on. What? Look at that. Fucking James. Are you okay, man? What is happening, James? James? No, I'm not on my Snow Himbo account. I won't shitpost on the official page. But, well, James. James, what are you doing? James has got a really good cup of coffee today. Look at James go.
God.
But look at this. This is just we're at 6 hours, and it's all the same. It's all the same keywords. And again, guys, for people who aren't Canadian, Justin Trudeau is a neoliberal capitalist. His government is center right. It's not far left. There's nothing far left about it. Even the NDP is center left. We don't have anything remotely close to socialist, for Christ's sake. But again,
okay, so let's be clear. There is a Communist Party of Canada. Okay, they're far left. There are other parties in Canada. The MAGA communism thing that started. What is the Communist Party that started under Jackson Hinkle?
American Communist Party. There's one up here in Canada.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. They've started a sister group up here in Canada, and they've already had meetings and stuff, and they're going to try and promote that. Now I can see that's actual left. And if you want to say it's communism, yes, it is, because they tell you it is. That's exactly what they are. But I'd rather have the actual truth of that being there rather than these faux left groups, these faux progressive groups. I'm kind of in the neighborhood of, if you want to think of my politics, it's very close to Jimmy Dore, where I see a lot of value in a lot of the progressive ideas. But I also see a lot of problems with the progressive ideas, and I think it needs to be sorted out. And I see a lot of problems with our neoliberal and neoconservative governments that we have, because they don't really hold up to any of the values. Their only value is taking money from donors and making sure that they pass bills that give those people the control of the market, more of the control of the market, and make the little guy hurt. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I mean, the crazy thing about these parties too is these liberals and progressive, which are just liberals with frills, don't make any mistake about that. They never correct the record. We're never seeing, I've noticed this both with Canada and the States. They just say, oh, these people are Marxist. You won't see a single instance of them being like, oh, no, we're not. We're absolutely not. We're not. Because they like people to say that, because it's all a game of Overton window management. We just have neoliberalism right down the middle. We've got two parties that are here. when it comes to policy. When it comes to actual like ideology, they're like here. But because you have to only keep your political affiliation within this acceptable tiny little sphere here, one side is fascist and the other side is communist, whereas in reality they're both pretty much just neoliberal capitalists.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, how many times do we have to look at whether it's Barack Obama or Donald Trump or Joseph Biden claiming that a leader of a foreign country that stands in opposition to their geopolitical aims, to their hegemony, as being, you know, the next Hitler. That's what they do it every time, right? And when it comes to our inside of our countries now, they're doing the exact same thing. They're dividing us and keeping us as divided as possible instead of trying to find common ground and find a common sense solution to problems, because that's the last thing they want us to do, is to be able to have a constructive conversation about where Canadians or Americans or Brits or French people stand and what is best for them. And I think that if we look at the problem that we have with disparity in North America, if you look back to our golden age, if you want to call it, which would be the late 50s and early 60s and maybe even into the 70s. And I think it started to fall apart in the early 80s to a great degree. But it can be directly tied to the fall of unionization. The disparity goes up as union membership goes down.
Yep.
It's almost like directly proportionate with each other. And I think that in terms of getting the power back to the people, that is our solution, is unionization. If we were to get unionization, and people can complain about corruption and unions and all that. Well, there's corruption in you know, all of our politics. There's corruption with politics and our corporations. We know that for a fact. So why are you afraid of corruption in unions?
I feel like it's I feel like it's an argument against it, and I feel like it's used in very bad faith a lot of the time. Where it's like, oh, but unions, X, Y, and Z, and it's like, okay, but still, this is corruption you can police. Versus if you just abandon the whole thing, you relinquish your power.
That's right.
Speaking to something you said beforehand with Canada being so spread out, my solution is I think we need to get the fuck together, and I think we need to do a general strike. Because my theory is that we don't even need a general strike. They just need to know that the threat is there. Yep. I think that'll be enough. Just knowing that the working class, the proletariat, is that solidified. Because the one thing is, the ruling class, all these rich psychopaths, they have solidarity. They all cover for one another. There's a reason, for example, why all these rich people never go to jail. But you've got a bunch of people in jail for smoking weed and shit. Or due to be executed even though they're innocent.
So back in the the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was a very big thing to be, for the governments in the Western Hemisphere, to be very, because there was a lot of worry about corporate power and how things were going and corruption. So there was a lot of resources in a lot of our lettered agencies that were looking at the white collar crime and you know, doing a lot of research on it and taking people down. And if you look at what's happening now, there's none of those resources there anymore. They're all gone. Everything is now gone to counterterrorism, intelligence, internet safety, disinformation, fact checking. All of the money that was spent before on making sure that our corporations were being, I guess you would say, at least having some ethics and morals, and not just being, you know, so driven by profit that they would put the public at risk. Those controls are no longer there. And I think it's something that we really need to look at. And again, the only way to do that is for us to come together and get more unionization, get more private groups together that can lobby our governments to put the resources in place for us to have some protection as citizens. But the problem is that will our government actually listen? And when I say our government, I'm speaking about Canada specifically, because if we look at what happened with the trucker convoy and with the protests that happened there, we saw exactly what happens when government is opposed to a large movement that, I mean, it was peaceful. There was nothing.
Yeah, I know.
Garbage. They can complain about people spitting or people peeing on the sidewalk, whatever you want to call it. It happens all the time in protests anyway. Okay, so if you want to vilify a protest, you can't do it by saying, this happened, that happened, that happened. There was no violence. There were none of the things that would make it illegal to do. What made it illegal is that it was a threat to power.
Yep.
That was what made it illegal.
It was a threat to Trudeau and his blackface.
I will always find it hilarious how they actually had the gall to pearl clutch over the one Nazi flag there. And then, what did we do in Parliament, guys?
The Canadian
who did we clap for?
That flag that you saw was a plant. It was an excuse. It was a plant. If you look at who was walking beside that guy, there's a photo that was taken by somebody else that ended up online. And you can see the cameraman, the photographer that Trudeau used and the Liberal Party used was marching right beside this guy. He's a red-haired fellow. If you go back to the photos from that period of time, I'm sure you'll find it online. But yeah, he was their photographer. So this was a Liberal setup to undermine the protests.
It's like here in the U.S. when you have white dudes with glasses and shorts and T-shirts. They're white supremacists, but they look like FBI agents. It's so painfully obvious they're FBI.
The weird Proud Boy marches where it's just like they all have their face covered, and I'm like, guys, come on.
It's so obvious they're FBI or federal agents.
It's like Crab always says, we deserve better psyops. Like, that's all I'm going to say. Like, you guys, can you please at least put some effort into this?
You know what's really funny is when you start going down the rabbit hole of looking at these professional protesters and you start looking at the different groups that are, the usual suspects during protests in the US and in Canada, you start to see a lot of connections between different groups. And it's really interesting for those of us who study a lot of leaks and Freedom of Information Act requests and things like that. You've got a connection between so many different groups in the U.S. and Canada that have direct connections to the CIA, for one, CSIS in Canada too.
Oh, they're like this.
Oh yeah, and also
the Five Eyes.
Ukraine.
They're part of the Five Eyes.
But specifically, Ukraine intelligence and Ukraine Nazi groups. And I don't know if you know, but I would assume you guys do. You guys seem pretty knowledgeable. But there was all of the Vault 7 stuff from WikiLeaks that were released that were CIA tools, hacking tools that were able to make it look, there was the 0-day thing. There was the hacking tools. So you can make it look like whatever country you wanted to had been the source of a hack or a leak. And this was brought to Ukraine in 2015 by John Brennan, who was the head of the CIA at the time. And so all of that cozy bear, fancy bear stuff that they were talking about, well, that was actually the Ukrainian IT organization that was doing that all, and they've been directly connected to Antifa. They've been directly connected to the Proud Boys, and these are obviously, as you can tell, either sides of the spectrum, right? So that goes to tell you that these things that are happening, they're manufactured, and they're also manufactured specifically for the purpose of division and keeping left and right separate.
Yeah, I've said it forever. The left and right paradigm, that's the real op. Okay, it shouldn't be left and right. It should be bottom versus top. That should always be the fight. But nobody wants that fight. They want you fighting over fucking bathrooms. They want you fighting over
abortion.
All of these. Yeah, abortion.
Here in the U.S., here is abortion. Yeah, the issue.
Abortion, all of these, and I feel like the job of here's what I feel like the job is. I think this is across the board, just for Canada and the U.S. I think the onus is on the Conservatives to initiate like a culture war argument, and then the Liberals play the other side. And all of a sudden, this is all you see for weeks. And we've seen it time and time again. You'll see the same cultural issue, and it just dominates. If you look at BreadTube, if you look at YouTube, if you look at content creators across the board, you'll see this concerted, like, we all need to talk about this and argue over it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then before you know it, nobody's talking about the rent anymore. Nobody's talking about imperialism anymore. Nobody's talking about any of these topics anymore. They're arguing over these things that, in the grand scheme of things, do not affect your life even remotely to the level that these other things should. Last I checked, being able to pay your rent is that's not a partisan issue. Just everybody has to kind of afford the rent. They have to afford their groceries. They need their purchasing power to at least rise to the point where they can deal with inflation.
I went to Walmart Sunday, and I spent $50, and I barely had enough for one bag of groceries. It's like, I remember $20 used to get me like 3 or 4 bags of groceries full. It's like that was like in the 90s.
One of the main problems there is that your purchasing power did not increase.
No, it
all
went
the price increases.
It decreased.
So I found a bill in my car, in my glove box from a couple of years ago. Well, more than that. It was actually before COVID. So 2019, late 2019. And the average amount spent then was only 60% of what I spend now. And we're buying the same things. Nothing really has changed. It's just that's how much the bills have gone up in that period of time. And you can say that's 5 years ago. Okay, 5 years. But you need to tell me that, we've gone up in 5 years. We've gone up about 9% a year in the amount of the grocery costs. That's kind of ridiculous. That's unheard of. And when you look at a lot of the products that we're talking about, we've changed some of the things that we buy. It just means instead of just buying what we want now, we're being careful about what we buy. We're making sure that oh wow, it's let's go through the ads and see for which store things are on sale for, because if we can save $2 here and $2 there, that means we can afford to get some of the other things that we want to get, rather than cutting it out of our diet completely, right?
99% of the population is like that. It's like, okay, gotta save here, gotta save there, gotta save here, gotta save there. And the rich, they're like, we don't care. We just want all the money for us. Give us all the money. And I'm like, don't you have enough? Like Elon Musk about to become a trillionaire soon. There's already talking in a couple of years he's going to be a trillionaire. It's like, how much money do you need?
Well, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick. For people who don't know, I have studied psychology. The problem is, for a lot of the people that capitalism rewards, just the system that we live under, the exploitative nature of it, what it takes to get to the very top, not just comfortable, not just I'm a business owner and I'm doing okay. To get to the very top, where you have an insane amount of money, that almost certainly rewards narcissistic or psychopathic traits. And the thing 100%. With people, on the cluster B spectrum, which is narcissistic and antisocial traits, lie on. A common thing they have is a persistent feeling, this is across all cluster B, a persistent feeling of emptiness.
Yeah.
Almost like there's a hole in them. And if you think about the way a lot of these people operate, these Elon Musks, these Jeff Bezos, they have everything in the world, and it's like, it's never enough. They need to acquire more. They need another island. They need to go to space. They need to, like, not at no point do they settle. So I feel like that's a systemic problem where those kinds of traits are rewarded under the system we live under, and then it becomes a problem for us all because there's no point in which you can actually settle because you have that feeling of emptiness, whereas in reality, someone who's more ordered and well-adjusted, you know, if I just owned a home and made enough to, you know, like, be comfortable, you know, maybe help out my friends, I'd be like, okay, I'm good. I don't care. But these people don't have that. They have this persistent emptiness that they always need to fill, and they don't realize that what they're trying to fill is it's like a dimensional pocket. It's never going to get filled. They always need more.
Well, I think of when I think of people like Elon Musk, I think they're so disconnected from what the average person sees. I mean, I'm sure that they remember parts of their lives where it was a lot closer to what the rest of us experience on a daily basis. But you know, if Elon Musk is worth $1 billion or $990 billion, I don't think it changes his life at all. I really don't. When you start talking about that kind of money, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like it's not even a matter of acquiring at that point. It's just it's an ego boost to say, oh, I got this, you know, like, and then to think nothing of it, you know, and if you talk to somebody, I've had the opportunity in my life to speak to a few billionaires, and they really just, it's like, doesn't really faze me one way or the other what people don't have. You know, I get the amount of money I have, and I spend the way I spend, and that's it. And it doesn't matter if gas goes doubles or triples. It doesn't matter when, you know, I don't have access to this car or that car, because I can just get a different one. It doesn't matter to me to lose, you know, this part of a market in some country because I've got enough. That, you know, when you're talking about, oh, I lost $10 million by losing that sector of the market, who cares? Who cares? You know, I tell my guys off because that's what I hire them for, but I don't really give a shit other than the fact that if that goes on for too long, then I might be in trouble. And so to stop that from happening, I'm going to give my manager shit and find a way to make money somewhere else. And that's it.
Yeah. You know, it's there is a profound, I've spoken to some wealthy people in my life as well. There is this, I know what you're talking about. There is this disconnect, and I feel like that might be a cluster B sort of situation too, because with that usually comes a lack of effective empathy.
Yep.
Whereas, like, these people behave in a way that they can't really put themselves in other people's shoes. And further to your point as well, you're right. It might not be about the money. It might just be about, where can I get my next win?
Yep.
What can I dominate? What is going to make, like, what is going to give me my next dopamine hit, essentially?
Yep. And legacy, the idea that you're going to remember me, that I'm going to be remembered 1,000 years from now and you won't.
That reminds me of I don't know if you guys ever saw Frank Zappa's last interview, but they asked him, like, do you want to be remembered? And he's like, not important. And they're like, really? He's like, it's not important. People like Bush, people like Reagan, these people want to be remembered. And they'll kill a lot of people and spend a lot of money to do it. So
that's why they want their names put on libraries. They want their names on high schools. They want their name, you know, all these things.
That's my That's my primary theory behind why Trump wanted that wall. I don't think it actually has anything to do with anything other than it will be the Trump wall, and that's
his legacy.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just now you're
It's
a wall, and so when you're dead and gone, people are going to call it the Trump wall. So, anyway, I thought you guys would get a kick out of this article here. I'm gonna put it here just so our lovely viewers can see it better. Jagmeet Singh, NDP, targeted by misinformation attacks. Foreign interference inquiry hears. NDP's national director says she fears online attacks will lead to real-life violence. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his party are being targeted by social media misinformation attacks that appear to be coming from out of Canada. The party's national director told Inquiry into Foreign Interference Thursday. Lucy Watson said there has been a spike in recent weeks in the number of online misinformation posts, such as fake news stories purporting to be from the Toronto Star claiming Singh had been held on charges of corruption. There are a number of posts along those lines that have been coming across our desks on a fairly regular basis, Watson told reporters after her testimony. Watson said the party believes the posts are coming from foreign actors. She would not say which country the party suspects is behind the posts.
Russia.
Yeah, isn't it funny how we all have the country already in our heads as we're reading this?
Yeah.
You know, it's stupid.
It's one of two countries. I'll guarantee you that.
What's silly about that is that like Russia would be the last one to try to attack the NDP. If anything, they would want to go after the Liberals, and the Conservatives would be second. The NDP would be third, and not just because the Liberals and the Conservatives are the usual two parties that Canadians vote for federally, or at least those that win. But because of their stances when it comes to Canada's involvement in geopolitical conflicts, you know, if there's any party that is staunchly behind the Ukrainians, it would be the Liberal Party, more so than the Conservatives, despite the fact that the majority of Ukrainians are conservative in terms of their voting. It's the Liberals that are most fiercely behind them. And it's something you just reminded me by going down this track here is the article by the Ottawa Citizen last week talking about the fact that the Wiesenthal group that were trying to find out again about the number of Nazis from Ukraine that had been brought into Canada, and that there was a Freedom of Information Act request put through, and the Canadian government denied it, which they're not allowed to do, really. But they denied it because they said it might embarrass the government and embarrass a number of large Canadian groups, specifically Ukrainian diaspora. So you're talking about the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and groups like that would have been embarrassed by the fact that there were at least 900 Nazi families that were admitted to Canada post-World War II, knowingly by the. And if you know anything about that, you know that they brought them in specifically to counter the previous Ukrainian, Russian immigrants who were specifically socialists from 40 years before. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that they'd be worried about being embarrassed at this point because the cat's kind of out of the bag at this point. It's like we're kind of cooked on the whole Nazi thing. We're kind of cooked on the whole like, is there any doubt that we are the baddies sort of thing? I mean, after it's like, hey Justin, how many times have you worn blackface? I can't remember. It's like after that, I don't know what to say. After you clap for Nazis in Parliament, like, is there any going back at this point? Like, we're kind of just cooked, especially with like the feverish devotion, and it's so weird seeing the gaslighting, the feverish devotion to supporting Ukraine, and they're sharing pictures, and you look at the patches on these soldiers, and it's like, I know that symbol, and it's not a good one.
Yeah.
Like the
They
Azov
clap.
Battalion.
They clap for literal Nazis. It's like we support Nazis here in the U.S. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we don't, but we've never clapped for literal Nazis in Congress. It's like
That's not true. That's not true. You had Azov members inside of your house, and you cheered for them, and the guys
well,
actually
okay,
had
we're guilty of that
Nazi.
too. Then yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
They had Nazi
You're right.
tattoos on them.
Yeah, we're guilty of
Yeah.
that too. Never mind. I retract that last statement. He's right.
Look, don't worry. It's not like you guys had a whole operation to like take in Nazis like after World War II, though. So
Well, yeah, we didn't do that. Oh,
no.
we did. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I retract that last statement. He's right. I forgot about that.
Good old Operation Paperclip. That should have been the red flag everybody paid attention to, but it was psyoped into the ground.
Well, the only good thing that came out of that, I think, well, there's a few good things that came out of it, is I think it woke up a lot of people. I know it woke up some of my family members. They were like, before that, they thought maybe my position was a little bit wacky or maybe un-Canadian. But when they saw that, they changed their tune. They were like, okay, well, you know what, Tyler, you were right. And sorry for for doubting you on that.
Well, yeah, that's fair, Fred. Yeah, I mean,
I
retract.
You guys take the cake for that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I retract that last statement.
That was one of the worst moments I have seen in my entire life. Us just watching this fucking war criminal walk into Congress and just like jump. How high? How much do you want? And everybody's just clapping like seals in the midst of a fucking genocide.
Yeah,
it still gives me chills.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've got a lot of acquaintances and friends. I had teachers in high school that were Jewish, and all of the ones that I can think of are anti-Zionist.
Same.
Or if not that, they are anti-war and anti-oppression. They're more peace-minded. And when you look at the way Zionism is playing out right now, it's so patently fascistic and so. I mean, there's so many parallels that can be drawn. I don't see how anybody with half a brain can say that what we're watching take place is anything but a parallel to what happened in World War II. There's a lot of the same rationalization that's used by the Israeli government that the Germans used and of that time period. So for me, I just can't understand how anybody could possibly support what's happening in Israel. And if you look at what's happening in Ukraine and you actually take the time to study what happened there, I mean, other than even if you go on the BBC, if you look up in the BBC, which is BBC World is possibly one of the most propagandized forms of media that you can consume. But even they have got documentaries about the Nazi problem in Ukraine. And not just one, there's several that they followed from 2012 all the way up to 2021. There's information. There's also the same information is available through the Times of Israel and other publications that people would consider, if they consume mainstream media, they would look at those and say, well, that's a reputable source. So if you don't trust them to tell you the truth, and where where do we see that, they haven't purged these things? If you search it, you will find, and it's very easy to find. Yeah, you have to go through a few pages because there's been so much about this talk about propaganda being used against Ukraine by Russia, but it's facts. It's not propaganda. It's pure facts, and it's easily searchable by our Western mainstream media. You just have to look for it. And the problem with most Canadians is that they don't have enough time to look at this and get all the things that they want in their life. That we're told to look at. Like, you're supposed to consume movies, you're supposed to consume music, you're supposed to consume sports. And if you spend any modicum amount of time on those things, you won't have time to police our government.
No.
And
Same problem we have here in America. It's like the focus is on the NFL. Like, oh, did you see the Bears game or the Cowboys game? Same thing here in America. And so I connect with Canadians. It's very similar. We're very similar, and our governments. Well, governments are different, but the people and what we focus on, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
that's why I'm thankful for having ADHD, because when that hyper focus mode goes in, like, you become an expert very quickly. Like, one day I'll just be reading some shit. I'll be like, what's Operation Bluebeam? And then I'm like, I have to know everything about this. I don't care if it's 4 a.m. This is what we're doing tonight. I don't care if my family thinks I'm dead. That's fine. I need to understand all this. Before you know it, it's just like, oh shit! Wow, I didn't know I didn't know the U.S. government actually had a whole operation for staging false flag events in order to trigger imperialist agendas. That was a rabbit hole I went down a little while after 9/11. But yeah, that's what I'm thankful for, because you're right.
You go down the rabbit holes of all the governments the U.S. overthrown.
Yeah,
that's an eternity. So I've done that, so it's like.
But yeah, it's like, I mean, to your point, nowadays it's even worse, because I don't know about you, but half the people I know, they have second jobs now. They have even less time. They're working overtime. Their purchasing power has gone down so much that it's like it's a fight just to survive. And on top of that, you have to deal with the stress of this fight to survive, and you have to do other things. And it's like, a lot of people, just like you said, do not have the time to have the sufficient amount of information. And the problem with our society is this is kept from us. Like, I grew up, for example, thinking the Allied forces were the ones who stormed in and defeated the Nazis. They barely mentioned the other guys.
I know. We all learned that history in school. Like, we did it. We beat the Nazis. Oh, it turns out the Russians did it. Oh.
Yeah, and then you go study the Battle of Berlin, and you're like, wait, what's that flag they're waving? Oh, that's not our flag at all. Okay.
No, that's the Soviets. It's like, whoops.
But that's to the elite, that's the even worse group. It's not the fascists.
So what's, just to kind of go back to where Canada has gone wrong. If you look at the heads of NATO were, after World War II, at the inception of NATO, you see a lot of the Nazi Germans were
Nazis.
Very, very high places. And you look at Canada, that, for a small country population-wise, we had a pretty significant presence in World War II. As a matter of fact, if you were to look at a lot of the laws in the Geneva Convention that stem from the Geneva Convention, the worst perpetrators of those crimes were Canadians in the Second World War. And there's a reason why they instituted those laws, is because Canada was, when it came to fighting their enemies, they just didn't care. They were going to do whatever it took to beat them, and that's it. So, it wasn't, a lot of people think, oh, that was because of what the Japanese did and what the Germans did and the atrocities that they committed. Yeah, a little bit of it was, that's mostly around the genocide and around those kind of world war crimes. But when it comes to actual crimes war that have to do with rules of engagement and how you treat prisoners and all of those things, that was Canada. That was the U.S. That was the UK. It had more to do with us doing those things, and for the people who stood on the other side saying, well, hold on a minute here. We're not the only guilty ones. You guys did this, you guys did that. And if you want us to play ball in this situation, we need to come together and agree on these rules so that there is some sort of morality in our combat, so that there's, some honor there. We've reached that point now when we look at what's happening in Gaza and in Lebanon and in, before that, we could look at Donbass. The West does not participate in war without breaking international laws. They do it regularly, and they do it without accountability. And that's something that we as Canadians and Americans, we need to, hold our governments accountable for and say, hold on, it's not misinformation. It's not propaganda. It is not because I support Hamas, which I will say to people, if I want to compare myself between Palestinians and Israel, if I'm going to back one of the two groups, I'll back Hamas before I back the IDF 100% of the time.
I'm at the point where 100%. I'm so
100%.
fucking mad. I just say I stand with Hamas and watch them melt the fuck down.
Yeah.
They'll melt down.
Sorry. I'm not playing your game where you're forcing me into the out group because I know this is it's the same thing every single time. I did a video on this narrative management. You got the in group, you got the out group. If you're not 100% in this, if you're not 100% compliant with the propaganda, they just place you in the out group anyway. So fuck it. If you're gonna be like you're a terrorist supporter, you're Hamas anyway. I'll just be like, fuck you. I support Hamas. What are you going to do about it? Yeah. I hope they win, and I hope this illegitimate state is wiped off the face of the planet. I don't give a shit.
You know what? I don't even think that Israel should be wiped off the face of the planet. I just think that when it comes down to, there's a lot of Jews in Israel that are beaten up daily in their protests against the IDF for what they're doing.
Yep.
And they want the equality they want. For Palestinians, they look at themselves as Palestinian. They say, our families have been here for generations. We never had a problem until you came, and that's how they look at things. They're not. This is why I think it's important that we have these conversations, because we can point to those people. One of the great accounts on X that I really like seeing their work is the Torah Judaism account. Because they regularly post that. They regularly show their resistance to the Zionist state of Israel and say, this is what we're doing to fight for Judaism, because they regularly say, like, Judaism, for the most part, they're secular. They don't even believe, in the Jewish religion. They're non-practicing Jews. So it's not even really a holy war that's taking place. It is a fake nationality trying to be foisted into the region and upon the people of the region. And, this colonial power is being supported by most Western organizations and countries, because it gives them a foothold into the Middle East and keeps prices low for oil and other things.
And that's why it's so important to have Jewish voices who speak out against
100%.
Yes.
In our network, Indy is Jewish. He is someone who speaks out very regularly in saying, like, hey, Jew here, this is not acceptable. Stop using our name. Gaijin Girl is another really good one. Keaton and Russell from Do Dissidents, they speak out. They're both Jewish. They speak out really hard against us too. We need people out there who are, correcting the record about this ridiculous narrative that, and the most insidious thing to me, at least, other people have said this as well, not presenting this as my own original thought, but the most insidious thing is how bad this reflects on Jewish people. Because if you have a whole IDF network of people saying any criticism of this state doing a genocide means you're against Jewish people, a lot of people are going to connect the dots, and you're starting to see it because you're starting to see a lot of the, I don't know how else to say it, fucking Nazi people like Nick Fuentes,
Yeah.
like standing on the same side as the people protesting protesting what's going on in Gaza, and it's like, well, yeah, because this is what you're doing. You're trying to say like this is, which I've said before, is completely ridiculous, because it would be like saying I don't like Joe Biden, therefore I'm un-American, or like I don't like Justin Trudeau. Oh, you must be un-Canadian. That's the same thing. You're protesting the actions of a state in a government against a group of people. That's it. And if you're going to make that conflation, then you're going to have to do it across the board, which would feel completely unfair to anyone who felt like they were on the other side of that. And I have a lot of Jewish friends who feel that way, where they're like, this doesn't feel fair to me.
Well, you know what else is really, really problematic is that is one of the core policies of Zionism, and has been for since its inception, really, which is in order for them to create the Greater Israel project and have it come to fruition, you need to drive Jews from other countries back to Israel or back to the region. That's the way they put it. You'll find that there are people like Menahem Begin and David Ben-Gurion who wrote on the subject, and they call it a colonial project. So all of these people who say that they're indigenous to the region, meaning the Zionists are indigenous to the region. There were some. There's Mizrahi Jews from Iraq, from Jordan, from Egypt, and other areas in the Levant. There are indigenous Jews. That's correct. There's actually Jews in Iran right now, believe it or not. There's Jews in Yemen even, but they're not on the side of Israel. But what happened is that they had terrorist acts that were created and perpetrated by Zionists who attacked people in the region and tried to drive them to Israel. And the same thing happens now when we have protests against Palestine. We have people specifically like Elon Levy, what's her name? Aviva Klompas, Jared Levy here in Canada, who make statements like, oh, it's not safe for Jews in Canada. It's not safe for Jews in the US. It's not safe for Jews in the UK. We have that. This is why we need Israel, is because, when I go back to Israel, I'm at home. But when I come, I can't walk down the street in Toronto because I'm afraid for my life because somebody might protest me. This kind of crap.
Eye rolling inducing.
Which is hilarious because you're close to getting it.
Yeah.
But you're not all the way to getting it.
Yeah.
The reason why you feel safe to begin with, you don't feel safe to begin with, is because you are being unfairly associated with the actions of a state because of their propaganda. It's their bullshit. All you need to do is step away from that and go, oh, no, I'm against this. That's it.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Zionists can't win this war. They already invaded Lebanon. If they piss off the rest of the Middle East, even if we, the U.S., get in there, they can't win this war. Then we wiped
the
off
U.S.
the map
can't hold the Middle East. They couldn't hold Afghanistan.
I know. Yeah. Well, so even if we get into it, they can't win this war. I don't know what the Zionists are thinking by invading Lebanon and trying to piss off the entire Middle East for. They're going to lose.
Yeah.
That's why I find it's insane the amount of saber rattling they're doing. Because first off, like with all these geopolitical issues, you're not going to beat China. You're not going to win against China in a war. There's no fucking way. You are going to get clapped. You're not going to win against Russia. And you're probably not going to win against Iran in the Middle East either. And guess what? No. Oh, by the way, you're going to be fighting all these fuckers if you go the hot war route.
Well, most likely. There's different groups, different organizations that actually do sort of wargaming to using AI and different computer models and different other sources, data sets that they can apply and look at what they know and what they don't know, and put in different variables, and look at where the U.S. would fare and NATO would fare if they were to get into war with these countries like China, Russia, Iran, Yemen. We know what will happen if you look at the Brookings Institute, the Institute for the Study of Warcraft. You look at the CSIS, and you look at there's a few other groups that do these sort of things. They know that they cannot win these wars. They cannot win. And as Julian Assange said, the goal is not to win wars. The goal is forever war.
Yeah.
And that is just specifically to keep people in combat, to transfer funds away from being used for the purpose that they are supposed to be, which is the betterment of the citizens' lives of the countries that they're collected in, to transfer those to multinational corporations and out of the hands of governments. So you could be talking about Boeing or Lear, Pratt and Whitney, General Dynamics, name an arms manufacturer. That's where they're going, right? And the fact of the matter is that they can't win against Iran. They cannot win.
No.
They could hurt Iran, but they can't win. They will never overcome, just like they couldn't overcome Afghanistan in a coalition.
Hell,
They can destabilize
the-
it, but they will not win.
The Russians couldn't win in Afghanistan. They spent 12 years there, the Soviets, and destroyed them.
That's right.
They couldn't win Afghanistan. So I'm like, what makes you think we could do it? And we spent 20 years there. We're still there, actually, technically. So even though Biden withdrew, but we're still bombing Afghanistan. So it's not like we won't give up that territory.
Yeah. It's the same thing could be said of what's going to happen in the Middle East, as far as this little foolish venture by Benjamin Netanyahu to try and prolong his stay in office to avoid being prosecuted and sent to jail for his crimes inside of Israel. I mean, that's all of what this is all about. And thankfully, a lot of Israelis even are waking up to that and saying, you know what? You're attacking Lebanon now, and we still haven't got our hostages back. So what are you doing? Now, most of us know that they don't care if they get the hostages back anyway, because it gives them a reason to continue doing what they're doing.
It's a prop. It's a prop. It's not dissimilar to the way that American Democrats regard abortion. They're never actually going to sort the problem out, because it's a prop. It's a prop they use to further their means.
Even if Kamala Harris is elected in November, Roe vs. Wade isn't coming back. They're going to use it as a campaign prop forever. If gay marriage is overturned here in the U.S., they're not going to do anything about it. They're going to use it as a prop. Hey, vote for us. We're pro-gay marriage.
That's right.
So it's just a waste
It
of
is
time.
the only thing that distinguishes the Democrat Party from the Conservative Party, or the Republican Party, is the fact that they can use the support of socially contentious issues to inspire people to give them a mandate, and the fact of the matter is that it's largely taxation without representation is what, right? If you can say that you're representing me in that regard, then it gives some legitimacy. But the fact of the matter is for most countries that you can't say that our governments are legitimate when they don't represent us, when they regularly ignore the people, their own constituents, and say, you know what, well, that's not important right now. I have to vote with the party because that's what the party says.
Yes.
Well, if your party is going to put themselves above the needs of the people, then that party is illegitimate and should be either voted out of office or disbanded. And I'm actually, for a long time, probably about 15 years of my life, my political leanings were towards elimination of party politics completely. As elimination of political parties are the worst thing that happened to politics.
This is a bit of my for people that don't know, I do have a bit of an anarchist streak. It's not dominant, but it's always like a little. It's like a tick. It's like a nervous tick. But I feel like in 2024, the fact that we still have these middlemen, these representatives, when we have the technology to just kind of vote, I feel like a better way forward for democracy would be something like having administrators. Because we can all just kind of vote on policy. We can all just weigh it. We can weigh in like instant. You can just get your phone and you can just give information. This whole like having people represent us in these parties and all this was useful back in the day. Why was it useful back in the day? Well, because we didn't have this technology. We needed people to go to a location and argue policy and get policy passed on behalf of a group of people.
Yeah.
The game's kind of changed. It's kind of changed huge. We can all kind of just weigh in now. So it's weird that we're not evolving with the times, and we're kind of, I don't know about you guys, but I largely feel like these political parties just serve as gatekeepers now. It doesn't matter what party I support or throw my weight behind. I feel like I'm being gatekept. I don't really feel like I have a voice, and nobody else I know feels that way either. It just feels like we just kind of vote for a party, roll the dice, and kind of hope that we're going to land somewhere near the direction we want our country to go in. And that's how I felt my entire adult life in Canada, to be perfectly honest. I felt that way. I'll admit it. I fell for Trudeau the first time. I voted for his stupid ass. I fell for it because he promised electoral reform. And that was something I thought was really important, because as a young adult, I was like, I'm really tired of voting and holding my damn nose. I don't think it's democratic. It doesn't feel democratic. It feels dirty. It feels like I just masturbated in a Walmart. It feels really fucking dirty. I could have used a better reference there, but I don't have a regret. But like it just feels dirty. It doesn't feel democratic. So like he got me with that, and I feel like we all have gotten the okie doke at one point. But then he gets into office and he goes like, "Oh, just kidding. We're not going to do that. We're in office now, so it doesn't matter. Just whatever."
Yeah. Exactly.
It's very similar to my experience. In 2004, I voted for John Kerry. In 2008, I fell right into the Obama train. I remember the first thing he said. He was like,
that shit.
Yeah, he was like, the first thing I'm going to do is codify Roe versus Wade. And he got elected. It's like, oh, that's not important. Like,
But you got Trudeau'd.
Yeah, exactly. And then I voted.
Trudeau okie doke.
Well, this is a fine kind of. I think I got to interrupt here just for a second. There's a comment made by Golden Monarch saying Canada surely has its own version of Trump and Harris. Major differences are that they're tree huggers. But now, what's interesting is this brings us right around back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the program, and in that Pierre Poilievre is trying to mimic the Trump campaign from the 2015, 2016. And if you look at the Trudeau campaign that, where he beat out the Harper government in 2015.
Gotcha.
Well, that was the exact same thing. The Trudeau, they were mimicking the Obama campaign of 2008. And this is what I was saying about before, where they use the same tactics when they see the same sort of political climate. They do the same thing, or if they see something that works, then they try and put their modeling out into the public sphere and push for these hot buttons or sore spots with voters. They manufacture them in order to get people to be upset and vote for them for a specific reason. So we've all been in the West in a position where we're constantly voting for what you perceive to be the lesser of two evils. It's not because you actually believe in one side or the other side, for the most part, unless you're an idiot. And there's a lot of idiots out there, trust me.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. I would say probably like 40-50% of the population is not politically literate enough to actually be trusted to vote.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree
yeah,
with that.
and I'm not saying that they're stupid. I'm saying that they're politically ignorant, right?
Yeah,
Um, but okay, that's fine. Then you've got the other people who are just plain stupid, easily led, and those are the ones that are most likely to end up being the loudest supporters of any political party, because they're easily brainwashed and thinking that this thing is whatever that topic is so important that it beats out any other consideration, and that we have to vote for this person on this because of this one particular issue, and this one particular issue is just so important that we cannot live if this other person who stands against us making that law gets into office, which is just fucking stupid. Pardon my French.
No,
it's fine.
no, we're fucking cool swearing here.
Hell,
But yeah,
I
it's
felt I felt I felt for Bernie Sanders too in 2016, and I felt
I
for
don't
that
feel
too.
like I can
Yeah,
I can fault anyone for falling for Bernie. And I
No,
do. Here's the thing. I actually I actually I'm actually grateful Bernie Sanders came along, because you know
me
what?
too.
There are so many people I know who are radicalized by that, and even though he shit the bed, he got cucked by his party,
yep,
he kind of like got absorbed into the machine. He radicalized a lot of people, and they kept going.
Yep.
When he stopped
I
moving, everybody else kept going. I know so many people who are former Bernie bros who now are like anarchists,
yeah,
Marxists, like populists. Like, these people didn't lose that energy. They lost Bernie, but they didn't lose that energy. They got
yeah,
snapped out of the status quo, and that's the gamble that I think the establishment doesn't realize it made and lost with Bernie. It's like, yes, you got all of
All of
these
that.
people,
hmm
you converted all
I've
these people from reactionary energy to revolutionary fervor, but they didn't lose the revolutionary fervor once Bernie kind of just pivoted and said, "Oh, we got to support Sleepy
we got
Joe or Crooked Hillary."
we got to
You
vote for
these
Hillary.
people are these people are still radicalized, and now they're dissidents against
I'm,
you. It was a
Yeah,
gamble that failed, in my
yeah.
opinion, at least.
I'm
Um,
like, when Bernie said we had to vote for Hillary, I was like, "Fuck you!" It's like I'm voting third party or whoever. I'm not voting for Hillary.
the
And this like,
closest the closest thing I had to Bernie as a Canadian was probably Jack Layton.
Yeah.
He's who radicalized
And
me.
he was real. He wasn't Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, he
I
was a
think
real.
Bernie Sanders is great for talking political ideology and trying to get people to understand what it is that he wants to see as a change. But Bernie Sanders is not a man who actually wants to fight the fight of actually making that change happen.
no,
Yeah,
absolutely not.
and
And I didn't
listen, if you
realize
want to
that in 2016.
listen, if you want to talk about a mustache, like, there's never been a greater mustache in the history of the world, actually, than Jack Layton's mustache. It was actually made of titanium, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure. But no, he's the guy that radicalized me. And to be honest, like, this was controversial to me at the time, because I was like still like half, that point where you're like half propagandized, you're like kind of getting it, but you still got like
Yeah,
blind spots and all that. There was an interview Jack did and everyone lost their minds at the time over this, because this is how like soup headed we are in the West. They're like, "So would you refer to yourself as a democratic socialist?" And he's like, "No, just call me a socialist."
Yeah.
And at the time,
yeah,
everyone went fucking mad. They lost it. I
Yeah.
saw so much like weird, like, like the McCarthy era, like propaganda, like that all started getting barfed up again. And I was just sitting here thinking, wow, that's insane. He doesn't give a fuck. He's like, this is what I stand for, and I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
And I got that same energy from Bernie. And yeah, Bernie might have been fake, but yeah, Jack Layton was like, I forget the exact quote, but he was talking to Stephen Harper, and he had his crutch with him.
Mhm.
He said something along the lines of like, "Given how unaccountable you are, I should give you this, and he like went to hand him his crutch. Like he was brilliant in the House of Commons. Oh my God, Canadians, go look up Jack Layton in the House of Commons. He was incredible. But yeah, he's the guy that radicalized me, and he didn't. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but that's why I'm thankful for these people, even though it might not result in a happy ending. It results in a happy ending insofar as like it awakens something in you that snaps you out of this comfy, like, this is the best we can do. You just got to suck up. We can never do any better. We're just going to have to be in this forever wars. We're just going to have billionaires control us. We're just going to have to like slowly amble towards a technocratic dystopian future where we live in the pod and we eat the bugs, and fuck, I'm going way too far here.
We eat the bugs.
We eat the bugs.
The bugs.
Yeah.
So just before we switch further along in this, I think it's really important, given the topic of the space, that we discuss what happens during that period of time with Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, what happens with Syria and Iraq, Afghanistan, all of these things that sort of came to a culmination, 2014, 2015, Ukraine as well, with the overthrow of the duly elected Ukrainian government, was the rise of this fact-checking and disinformation. And also, if you look back to that period of time and what happened since then, you could see that was when the millennials and Gen Z were really taught about fact-checking, and this is where this woke idea came from of the cancel culture, right?
Yeah.
And if we look at what's happened now, we can see that it's something that worked very, very much against them when push came to shove between Ukraine and Russia, because I know I myself, I worked a lot with DD Geopolitics, and we did a lot of exposing of the false information that was coming out of Ukraine.
Oh, dude, I love that account. I love the shit out of those guys.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
Sarah's Jewish, right? And there's like 15 people that are involved with that group. So, although she was like the person that you see as being the face of it in terms of interviews and that sort of thing, there are so many people that have been involved with that in terms of getting the truth out there, and just technical support and that sort of thing for doing spaces or doing interviews, and like you're doing right now, even all of those people played a part in giving the best information possible to people who are wanting to know the truth. And where I was going with this was the fact that when we look at the attempts by the Democrats to sort of push the Russiagate thing and push, Russia being the source of all of their ills, and it was because of Russia that Hillary Clinton lost, et cetera, et cetera. They sort of trained the younger generation to be a little bit more critical in their thinking, and I don't think it was an intended consequence. They wanted people to just believe what they said and discount anything outside of that narrative. Unfortunately, people are a little bit smarter than that, and they say, okay, well, let's start looking into these things. Let's start searching out the information, the best information. Let's geolocate things. Let's get these people that are involved with all of these different aspects of finding out what the truth was. And so when it came to Ukraine, Russia, and then even worse, a year ago almost now, when we had seen what had happened in Gaza after the Hamas attack on October 7th, although I'm a believer in that Israel sort of assisted that it happened because it played into what they wanted to have happen, which was an excuse to commit a genocide in Gaza, or at least ethnic cleansing. And we know that because of the Hannibal Directive that was given on that day. But again, that goes down to, people like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mattei and Kit Clarenberg, who are investigative journalists and who can tell us these things. But we've got people like those people are people who inspire me and other people like me to look at these events critically. And I think, there's a movement in the younger people now to not listen to their government, specifically because all those things that they were told when they were younger, they're in their face, right? Like it's blatantly false and easily debunked. And that is why you look at the censorship being what it is and why they were looking at TikTok and trying to make TikTok kowtow to the US government's demands, because you've got this generation who's saying, fuck you,
Yeah.
full of shit. And yes, that's a genocide that's happening, and making it mainstream news.
The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command.
That's right.
China owns TikTok, so we have to get rid of it, right?
I was going to make a joke about that too. It's like, but China is doing the TikTok.
China.
China.
It's China.
China. My favorite video of Trump is the one where someone did a mashup of like every time he said China.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one spree where he mentioned China, I think it was like 26 times in the same speech. Yeah. It's just like China. Like,
China.
I will make a bold statement that I've made before. Everybody's like, when did the Cold War end? I don't think it ended. I don't think the Cold War has ever ended. I think they just said it ended, and I feel like the powers that be wanted to say it ended because then they could just keep doing covert Cold War. But like, I don't think anything's changed really. I'm still seeing the same recycled propaganda that I heard from my father and I heard from my grandparents.
What they weren't counting on is they weren't counting on Russia actually having people that were patriotic. When I say Russia, I mean the Soviet Union. They were hoping that when they separated into their different states, and the wall came down in Germany and all the rest of it, and freedom in Czechoslovakia, and then the Balkanization of Yugoslavia. All of these things were meant to divide and conquer the Slavic people, and they were hoping that they would be very mercenary with their resources in Russia, and just it would sort of devolve into more, I guess you would say, a segmented society, and then eventually become separate countries within that, which they're still trying to do, right? That's what that's what the whole point of this this egging on of the war with Ukraine was all about, is the Balkanization of Russia, and into, I believe it's 11 separate states they want to break it into. But anyway, it's just not going to happen. They weren't counting on the fact that even though you had a bunch of people who were corrupt from the Soviet Union, that those same people, although they might be trying to take control of resources and sell them to the highest bidders, et cetera, at the same time, they love their country and they're not going to go anywhere else, and they're not going to sell it out if it means, killing their people. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we saw with Ukraine is that when push comes to shove, Russians come together. Right? And it doesn't matter if you're on the east coast of Russia and you don't speak the same languages as the people in the West. They view themselves as Russian, and they view themselves as a separate people from others. They're Russian first, and then they're Muslim. They're Russian first, and then they're Christian. They're Russian first, and they're Jewish. However you want to look at it, Christian, it doesn't matter. But the first thing is that they're Russian, and I don't think that the West was counting on that. I thought that they could maneuver the entire society like they had maneuvered Boris Yeltsin.
The West thought they could westernize Russia and Eastern Europe, and especially when Yeltsin took over once the Soviet Union fell, it's like he was just a drunk, and he just did exactly what Bill Clinton told him to do. As soon as
Yeah.
Putin took power, like that changed. The West was kicked out, and ever since Putin was an enemy of democracy, enemy of the West, and he was like like um like power number one. We have to get rid of Putin. He's been in
Yeah.
power pretty much since 1999. I was a teenager, and he's still around. So it's like, but here's the thing. This is what I wanted to make. The most stable governments, the governments that are actually run properly, are from authoritarian governments like Russia and China and countries like that. Like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They keep getting
Yeah.
reelected for a reason, because they're running their governments well. Meanwhile,
Here's
here
the
in the democracies here in the West, we're all chaotic, and here in the U.S., where we have Kamala Harris, we have empty suit like her, we have a game show host like Donald Trump running, and we're acting like we're better than the Russians or the Chinese. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Here's a point I just want to quickly make. I think for all of our talk about authoritarianism in governments, I think the West is far more authoritarian than they
Yes.
like to admit they are. And I
Of
think
course.
that these authoritarian governments might be a little more democratic than we've been brought up to believe they are.
100%.
Especially
If-
in China. They don't, it's not just one evil, like, dictator guy. They do
It's
have
Xi
democracy.
Jinping.
There
Yeah.
is democracy. Like,
Mhm.
it's not, the people don't have no voice. Like,
Here's I don't know if you remember it.
It's
I
so
think the
goofy.
greatest example of that was near the end of when the lockdowns were happening here in North America.
Uh-huh.
It was way worse in Canada than it was in the U.S.
Yes, it
Uh,
was.
But
yeah, it sucked.
but obviously it was way worse in China. But then
Yes, it was.
eventually the Chinese people had enough. And
Yeah.
the government, after everything opened up, they had an outbreak and they tried to close things down again.
Mm.
The police in the streets got the shit beat out of them by the Chinese people, and they
Yeah.
said, right? So the thing is that we don't understand, and this is where the primary problem comes in, I think, when it comes to our governments here in the West, is that we don't understand how people in Asia think. We don't understand how people in Russia think. We project the way we think onto them and then try to guess their motivations based on our projection. And it's a really big mistake to make because people in Asia are far more community oriented and far more family oriented than we are, right? And the same thing goes for Russia. They think more of they're self-interest, and there's a reason why corruption in any country happens, right? And that's because people are self-interested and they want to see themselves excel and get ahead of the person next to them. That's just the way it is. It's competition as a species is just playing out in a different way. But when it comes down to the good of the herd over the good of the individual, they will take the good of the herd over the good of the individual, right? And
that was by design. Individualism in the West did us no favors. It made us so much more easily manipulated. It made it it makes it very hard to organize because of this individualist mindset. And it makes it way harder for us to predict our enemies or whatever, to your point. It is hard for someone in the West to think about how people in other nations think, because they do think of like, it's sort of a collectivized narcissism as opposed to an individualized narcissism. It's a narcissism of a group of people versus a narcissism of just like one person. It's just like, it's me and my shit. And I got to think like, I got mine, fuck you. That's kind of the shtick we got over here. But that's not
it's
shtick we got over
interesting.
there.
We have Caitlin Johnstone actually has a term for the American mindset. She calls it American supremacists or American supremacism, where they believe that they're superior so much that they will disregard information to the contrary, just because of, I'm an American. And it works for the West as well. I mean, if we were to look at Canada, we think of ourselves as better than Americans for the most part. Most Canadians,
It's true.
they are
No,
inherently
there's
better.
a smugness. There's a smugness.
They
It's
think
an
that they're
ugly
inherently
smugness.
better than an American, and it's no different. It's no different.
smugly.
It's arrogance, and it comes down to this idea of nationalism and patriotism. There is something to be said for being having pride in your country and being patriotic, but at the same time, it's a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. You can be stupid about it and disregard facts and and take away your objectivity and become problematic when it comes to understanding how you have to interact with other countries. And if you think that you're inherently better by virtue of where you were born, that's just stupid. Or where you chose to live, became a Canadian or became an American or became a Brit. It's just fucking stupid. You're an idiot to believe that by virtue of that fact alone, that somehow that makes you a superior human being and that you're morally and ethically able to rationalize and be able to interact on a level when it comes to conflict resolution or anything else in a superior manner than any other country would. It's just fucking stupid. And we in the West have got to drop this idea that somehow we're superior just because we were born here. It's just dumb. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always been a little silly. But again, it's largely bred from this incorrect assumption that being in a specific location under a specific government or state automatically makes you. I mean, a perfect example is in Palestine, because a lot of people deep down, I guarantee you, they don't see them on the same level as they see themselves or their neighbors.
That's true.
And that's the problem, because you need to have that mindset, and that individualist sort of perspective clouds that so fucking hard. And I think that's by design. I don't think it's accident.
Well, in that case, it actually goes beyond that. It's to the point where they believe. So, I mean, it's one thing for the Jews to say that they believe that they're the chosen people of God. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? But when it comes to Zionists, they actually believe that they are the only humans. And this is where it parallels Nazi Germany is that they are the master race. They, if you have chosen to be Jewish or chosen to, because they include, if you want to move to Israel, if you've what do you call it? Been, why can't I think of the word? If you've chosen to become a Jew and converted, there we go, to Judaism, you can go to Israel because you now have a birthright. Go and live there, and you can go and kick a Palestinian out of their house and claim it for your own, right? Just by virtue of converting to Judaism, which is just ridiculous. But the same thing happened with the Germans, is this idea that they were superior. So if they're superior, and all of their problems can be traced back to the intervention or to the people who are not Zionist in this case, or for others who think that they're Jews and believe in Zionism, then they're not Jewish, so they are less than. They're human animals, and we've heard people like Yoav Gallant say exactly that, and many Jewish officials, both bureaucrats and unelected officials of the Israeli government say such things, and Netanyahu himself making such statements over the years. It's just obvious that if you want to have a people who are willing to believe that they are superior to other peoples, but also that they are being held back because they're superior and that everybody is out to get them, what does that end up being? They're a paranoid people who are willing to do anything to other peoples because those people aren't human. They're not human. We can do what we want to them, and we don't have to justify ourselves because they are lesser than we are, and we, as the master race or whatever you want to call it, however they want to phrase it. We should be allowed to do this because, and then you've got some major event like the Holocaust. Well, we're victims. Well, this victim mentality combined with the master race ideology is just the perfect storm to manipulate people into believing that they can do whatever they want because we are victims and we're only protecting ourselves. It's bullshit. And that's what we really need to combat is that kind of thinking.
It's crazy to think about when you think about like the way the roles have been reversed. And I think about this a lot, and I'm going to go on a bit of a gamer tangent here, but there's a lot of examples in like high fantasy, not just gaming, like literature as well, where you have a race that enslaves another race. So I'll reference EverQuest. So in EverQuest, there was a group, there were dragons. I'm going to lose a lot of people, I don't care. There were dragons, and they enslaved a group of lizard people. And eventually the lizard people broke free from the dragons. They gained their freedom. And the first thing they did when they gained their freedom was enslave another race of people. And that kind of always reminds me of this in this sort of hurt people mentality where it's like, of all the factions to be committing a genocide that we're all horrified by right now, I did not expect the faction, and it goes so far as to go like, holy fuck, go look up the history of Israel. Go look up like where this all began. This all began from a genocide, and we somehow arrived back at fucking genocide. Like,
absolutely,
it's so crazy.
Yeah, like you wouldn't think it'd be possible, and this is where people like Gabor Mate and Norman Finkelstein are so important because they fight against it and say like, no, you cannot use what happened to my family as an excuse to commit atrocities against another people. This is something that it's kind of a parallel logic that I see a lot when it comes to different societal ills. Is that because this happened, we are exempt from criticism for the actions that we take because this bad thing happened to us. So if people say African Americans, right, were to say, we're exempt from criticism for human trafficking because we were slaves in earlier on in American history. Well, obviously that makes no sense, right? And it makes no sense for Israel and Zionists to say that they should not have to be criticized. And this is the point we're at in at least the U.S. now, is that they're terming the criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And and they're passing bills on this right now.
Yeah.
Here in the U.S., they want to pass a bill which, if you're anti-Zionist, they want to equate it to anti-Semitism, anti-Jew, which is illegal, and they want to imprison people for it here in the U.S. So you criticize Zionism, that means that you're anti-Semitic, and you can get in trouble for that.
And here's the thing. We all need to push back against every little inch they take, so to speak, because the direction this
100%.
is eventually going to end up at is you do wrong speak, you go to jail.
That's right.
Period.
Yeah, that's where they want to get to.
We're already there. Depending on what you say in Canada, you will be prosecuted. You will be.
Yeah.
In the UK, it's worse, right?
Oh yes, the UK is
there in the US. It's coming. It already happens in Germany. It already happens in France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweden, Denmark, all of those places. It's Norway even.
In Germany, I've seen a story recently where the police were chasing some guy because he had a Palestinian flag, and they were trying to beat the
It was
hell out
a
of him.
10-year-old child. It was a
Oh,
10-year-old child.
they
Yeah,
lose
yeah.
their minds over the Palestinian. I saw this one Karen video where this person's like melting down on an air flight attendant for having a Palestinian flag, and they're
Flag.
talking about like,
Yeah.
why are you a terrorist or some shit? And I'm like, first off, what if they're Palestinian? What
Yeah,
then? What are you gonna say then?
Yeah.
What? Well, it's a
And
terrorist.
secondly, what is it
Ridiculous.
like? What is it not okay to have a flag pin on your clothing? Are we really there?
By that token, if somebody was to be wearing an Israeli flag on their clothes, and somebody was to report them to the company for supporting a terrorist state that is committing a genocide, what do you think would happen?
They probably send them a coupon. They probably give them 50%
I believe it was
off.
Delta Airlines that happened on. Okay,
Yeah.
that incident that you're talking about, and I believe that they said that you're no longer allowed to wear any sort of pins on your clothing other than the ones issued by the company, right? So that's an effort to depoliticize their company culture, which that's fine, but how are they going to police it? And the reason why I asked the question about the Israeli flag is, are they policing it? And this is for me the biggest thing, because here in Canada we have laws about incitement to genocide. We're a Rome Statute country. We're a signatory, which means that we are subject to the International Criminal Court. And we've created laws around the Genocide Convention, right? And some of that is incitement to genocide. There's laws around incitement to genocide, right? And here, I bring this up for a reason, because if you go to paradigmslip.ca, there's a template there for you to write out a protest, and you just have to look up different people. The one that's there that you'll see is around Stephen Harper, who made some comments in 2014 that were incitement to genocide, and specifically by the Conservative Party of Canada at that time. And they've made statements just in the last year, numerous politicians. And as I said, paradigmslip.ca. If you go to that, there's a template there to specifically go after Stephen Harper, and you can read up on it on that site. But that same sort of phraseology, and if you look up different, so if you want to take that form and replace names and then give evidence, all you have to do is take that to an RCMP office, or address it also to the Attorney General of Canada or the Attorney General of your province, and they have to look at it. They have to register that it's been taken in, and the Attorney General has got to make a determination to lay charges against these people. Now, if they don't, and we have enough people who are referring charges against these people who are advocating for genocide by Israel, you can then bring it up in the government as well, and say, why, if there's been people, these are the laws as they stand. This person said this thing on this day, and it's obviously incitement to genocide. Now you have to investigate it and lay charges. If you're not laying charges, why are you not laying charges? And if you are not laying charges in this case, how can you possibly in the future lay it against anybody else? Does that mean the law gets struck down? It's a very, very important thing that we do these sort of things. Because if we don't do these things, then we're allowing our government to pick and choose how they apply laws depending on which country they're allied with, instead of what international law actually says.
That's a great idea if you're Canadian. Here in the U.S., we're not a signatory to that. So to the
It doesn't
international
matter, because you guys have got laws, that
Yeah.
state level laws that are against incitement to genocide and
Yes.
genocide itself. So the trouble is that you people are not using them, just like us Canadians are not
Yeah,
using
yeah,
our,
exactly. Hmm.
right? So even though you're not a signatory to the ICC, you've got laws that don't allow you to provide material aid to
Yes.
people who have been plausibly accused of committing a genocide.
Yeah.
Those laws sit, and there's state level and federal level laws, and we just
Americans and Canadians are very similar for the most part. Like,
yeah,
oh well, we don't do anything. Oh yeah, we want to do something about this, but I'm busy. I have 2 jobs, and I got to watch American Idol this Sunday, so much I can do about it. Let somebody else take care of that.
that's right.
Unfortunately, a lot of
That's right.
people act like that. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
guys,
All right.
I'm gonna have to shut her down here, so I'm gonna let you go.
oh okay,
Yeah. I mean, we're on we're on about 2 hours, and
Yeah,
yeah, we're
it was a
running.
good it
It's
was
a
a
great
good
conversation.
yeah, it
yeah,
was a good conversation
I'm
to
glad to
have.
meet
Something.
you. Yeah.
yeah. Me too. Really good to speak with you guys.
Mm.
I'll gladly do it again.
Yeah, for
Look
sure.
forward
We'll
to it.
definitely
Yeah.
have you on another time because yeah, this was definitely fun. We're welcome to Canada. Welcome to Canada, Angel.
Well,
Angel,
thank
yeah,
you.
you're,
I
you're
appreciate it, man.
honorary Canadian.
Honorary
welcome to
Canadian for
the
tonight.
welcome to the jungle. We have no fun and no games.
We'll have to send you some maple syrup and some poutine.
Oh, that's not. Yeah, I'd be
And
interested in tasting that.
I'll send you a bouncy castle too. Oh, and beaver. Have you ever had a beaver tail? By the way, Angel.
Uh, let's hope
No,
so.
no,
Oh my
I don't.
god,
I don't even know what that is,
dude.
honestly. Unfortunately.
Oh, it is the worst thing ever, but it's also the best thing. That's the only way I can describe it.
It's a type of donut,
Okay.
but it also sounds
Oh,
like something dirty.
yeah. That's why I'm
Yeah.
like, what is that?
Yeah,
It does
you're
sound
like a little
dirty.
hesitant. You're like, shit. What direction are we going here? Um, all right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to episode 9 of the Maple Files. Tyler, real quick, I checked you out for a bit. Are you working on a podcast like in the near future or?
Yeah. So generally, I've been trying to set something up for a while now. I'm trying to find a way to like drum up some funds to sort of make the studio, and I've got a spare room that I want to transform. And so if you go up and you look at the Fix Collective on X, or if you go to my account at that Tyler Pop on X as well, you'll find a link there that you can donate to that if you want to help me out with that. But I regularly go on Spaces. The last couple of weeks I've been a little bit lax on it. Actually, probably for closer to a month now because I was a little bit sick before. But yeah, I do Spaces, and I want to start a YouTube podcast, much like you're doing right here, and talk about how we in the Western societies can fix our governments. And one of the ways I think that we can do that is through multipolarity and supporting multipolarity, which means if you want to talk about it in the political sense, it would be allowing different spheres of power to exist globally instead of trying to force one power on the rest of the world in one way of doing things. So I'm a big supporter of non-interventionist policy for our government. I'm a supporter of self-determination for many countries, and people that have been subjugated. They should allow. I fully believe that there's a movement here in Canada, the Bloc Québécois. If they wanted to separate from Canada, if they think that they would be better served having their own government rather than being part of Canada, then so be it. Have a vote, and if the majority of your people want to leave Canada, then so be it. You can go. And we should do whatever we can to assist them. The same thing with the people of Catalonia, the same thing with the people of Donbass, the same thing with Palestine. This is the way things should be. Is that we should not be at a point in our evolution that we need to go to the force of arms and to killing innocent people for the sake of some foolish ideology where we have to be in control of a certain plot of land. It's just ridiculous to me. And I hope that you guys, have similar feelings, and we can discuss on, how do we fix all this? That's the whole point, is to have the discussion, and that's why I called it the Fix Collective.
That's great. No, I'm super down for that, because here's the thing. I say this to everybody across the political board. Whatever comes after this system, these governments we have, it's not going to look like anything before. So we're going to have to start talking. It's not, we've reached an unprecedented level of technology. We've reached an unprecedented situation geopolitically, globally, across the board. We're going to have to get a little creative here. And I think that scares a lot of people. That's why people go back to like, let's maybe try and recreate this or recreate that. We're going to have to get creative. And I get that it's scary, but the best way to make it less scary is to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
We can definitely do better than this shit. We can do better than a handful of people owning the planet. We can do better than an empire that is just in this constant cycle of just dominating. And yes, Israel is part of that empire. Please do not delude yourself. Dominating every other country it can to just do the same old, exploit all of the resources it can, install puppet government. And now you got another like satellite. Like, we can do better than this. We can do better.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, while all this shit is going on, while all of these prime initiatives our governments are supporting and 200% behind are going on, everybody I know we did it on an episode of the Maple Files. The average household debt in Canada is $40,000. $40,000, guys. $40,000.
How much that servicing the interest on that is. Servicing the interest on that. Just think of how much that is every month.
That's the trap. The interest is the trap. That's to keep you in the debt. And that's without a mortgage, guys. That's without a mortgage. That's not even including the mortgage. That's just, you are falling that fucking behind on being able to just live, just survive. And no, axing the carbon tax is not going to fix that. We need better. That's dumb. That's stupid.
Well, we're approaching the point now where it won't matter, because when America defaults on their interest payments, they've been able to print money at will since World War II, effectively. Actually, no, it was probably the 70s when they But the fact of the matter is that that's coming to an end. Already. The interest on their debt is approximately $1 trillion a year. It's more money to service the debt than it is for their Department of Defense. Their defense budget is
not
as much as the interest.
We're not paying that. We're not.
Yeah. So that is coming to an end, and what I really think is going to happen is I think that we're going to have the shit hit the fan. Technologically, we've got an aging empire that is unable to produce the arms that it needs to subdue their enemies, and their technology is behind what their enemies have. So what we're going to see is that they're going to become, if they're not already, a paper tiger. And when that happens and it's exposed for the world to see, they're going to have a choice, and that will be to either force submission, and that would be nationalizing all of these companies that have been to this point, multinational companies that are outside of government control, like, as I mentioned before, Lockheed Martin and Boeing and General Dynamics and companies like that. Well, what's going to happen is that they'll nationalize them and say, you will make the profit that we say you're going to make. And for right now, it's not going to be, because we need you to produce as much as you possibly can so that we can beat our enemies. And that's the only way that it'll work. And if they can't do that, well, what happens? Well, if they can't project power the way they used to, they can't print money at will anymore. They're going to be like any other country out there, who, if they spend more than they make, you get downgraded, and we got so much debt that they're gonna say, well, let's restart. We're gonna forgive everybody in the world's debt. Everybody is gonna reset the whole thing. Okay, nobody owes anything, and we'll start from here. That's my belief that what'll happen, and if that comes to pass, I mean, there's going to be a lot of jockeying happening between these foreign powers that are challenging the U.S. right now. And you're going to see a lot of countries that, like France, like Germany, who've been under the yoke of NATO and under the yoke of the US or the UK. And France has not been under the yoke. They're sort of a colonial power in their own right, but they're losing that right now in Africa. So what does this all mean? It means that they're going to, contract a little bit. Everybody's going to sort of look after themselves more. And that plays into that idea that I was talking about of multipolarity. Allow each, geopolitical region to be its own, and each allow the geology to determine where where countries exist. You've got the Alps that separate France from, Germany and Italy. There's a reason why countries' traditional lines are where they are, right? And I think that we're going to move back to these things. That's what I believe anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also feel like on some level we'll be forced to actually cooperate on a level that we just aren't doing. Like, we'll be forced to actually fucking get along. Maybe actually work together on some level.
Hopefully.
Because this whole stupid shit we have going on, where it's like, why are we enemies with Russia and China? Why? They're doing really great. Look at the video of Beijing right now. China is in the future. Yeah. They are windmill dunking on the West technologically right now. Why are they enemies? We don't need to be. We just work together. Everybody can just work together. There's a whole universe out there we could explore. There could be a whole planet of just like intelligent T-Rexes out there, and we're not hanging out with intelligent T-Rexes and getting high because we're busy fucking around on this planet. So let's work together to get to that planet of intelligent T-Rexes, because who knows what kind of weed they have. They might have really good weed. They might have the best weed ever. We don't know.
They can have frogs that are just awesome if you like them. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. I'm gonna sign off.
Oh, nice to meet you. I followed you already, so
okay. I'll check that out, and I'll follow. If I'm not following you already, I'll follow you after that.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah,
everybody, be sure to check out Tyler Pop. Check out the Fix Collective. This was super fun. If you haven't followed Angel, follow him as well. He's our favorite new Canadian. He's just moved to Canada.
Yes,
mentally, I suppose. Have a wonderful night, everybody. It's been a
good night.